Hello there and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. I am Vlad and we are here in La Cripta, a very beautiful Bitcoin place. The owner, Augustine, let me record here and he said that to him it's sort of like a fight club sort of place where he gets friends of his and Bitcoiners and they hack, they build stuff. He works on Nostr stuff. So thank you very much, Augustine. You're also going to be on the show soon. And I'm next to Sergi Delgado. And he is a developer at Chaincode Labs. He works on Bitcoin and Lightning projects. And I think the funniest and most interesting project that I found in his GitHub is the Eye of Satoshi, which is a Watchtower implementation that he wrote. And while we were here a few days ago, he also made a presentation in which he spoke about a Lightning simulation sort of software that he used. If you want to test new features or test a new way to make payments, that can be very cool. So I guess this was a pretty in-depth introduction. Welcome, Sergi. Well, what do you want to talk about first?
What would you like to hear about first? We can start by SimLN if you like, which is the thing I was presenting here earlier this week. I think it was like 3 days ago or so. Given I'm not doing that much stuff around the Satoshi anymore. So yeah, I can kind of like give you an introduction of what SimLN is and why did we build it, right? So I think you made a nice introduction of the idea. We created a payment simulator for Lightning, or an activity simulator, more than a payment simulator for Lightning, because the main comment we get normally is like, okay, how is this different from Polar or anything like that, right? So the idea behind SimLN is if you have a project, either like a node implementation or something working on top of Lightning, and you need to simulate activity on Lightning, it's perfect for you to just like, you don't have to like waste the time like creating these ugly bash scripts that are only going to test like a subset of the functionality that most likely you want to end up testing, or you don't want to spend time and resources like building these from scratch. It felt for us that a lot of projects in the space had like ugly, incomplete scripts for testing like small subsets of functionality. So the effort was being replicated, and most of this was not even open source because, again, like that's something that is not. It's not like production ready. It's not something nice that you want to like put out there. You know, you use it for yourself, and if it's not complete, then whatever. So that was kind of like the starting point, the motivation behind this. We built it. I think it was around. We started building it around August as a Chaincode Labs kind of like workshop. I mean, we brought together some people, and like there were people from Chaincode Labs, and there were people from different parts of the world. Actually, the team that started working on that was Joram from Fedimint. It was Carla and me from Chaincode, and then there was Emmanuel who came from Gala, Africa. And one of the main use cases we saw for this was channel jamming. We want to have like a taste framework for channel jamming. So the first idea was, okay, we're going to test payments. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, most of the stuff that you're going to be end up testing in the Lightning Network are going to be payments, right? So the core idea of this is that you may have a setup already, a Lightning Network, either a Rectest Lightning Network or something on SimNet or like something like that. And then you want to test something on nodes that you may control and something on nodes that you may not. Then how you do this mainly is that you give connection details from the node you do control, and then you create the activity that you want to test. It may be like, I don't know, pay from Alice to Bob like 300 millisatoshis every second or something like that. Or you may want to like do this in a more random way. That's one of the things that we took more time into, which was, okay, I may not know exactly what the amount or like the time I want to test is, but I want to test something that makes sense in terms of the Lightning Network. So can we kind of like abstract or like emulate the behavior of the real Lightning Network and put it there? So whatever you're trying makes sense. Let's say it's realistic. And obviously, I mean, we did this randomly. I mean, we generate this in a random way, and we have made like some design decisions that may not completely mimic how Lightning works. But we think it's a nice starting point for this. And We released this, I think it was like 3 weeks ago or so. And the idea right now is like get as much feedback as we can get. So if there's any functionality that you want there and it's not there, let us know.
Interesting. But in your implementation of this simulation of the Lightning Network, what kind of code base did you use? Were you using Blockstream's Core Lightning, or were you using LND by Lightning Labs, or maybe LN Dev Kit?
Right now, the simulator works both for LND and C-Lightning, so you can connect to any LND or C-Lightning node. And the idea is extending it to also cover LDK and Eclair down the line. So LND and C-Lightning was kind of like easier for us because the interfaces are normally better known. And I was used to work with CLN before for the Satoshi. And Carla was used to work for LND. She was working at Lightning Labs for kind of like a long time. So it was kind of like a nice team in the sense that I know how to do this in CLN, you know how to do this in LND. We build all in Rust, by the way, like as it should be. And we don't have like that much experience with Eclair. We do with LDK. So the next like normal step should be like go for LDK and then try to figure out how to do it for Eclair too. But again, it's completely open source. So if someone knows how to do this in any other way, the whole code base is built using traits. So it's really easy to just like add new features and add new nodes to the existing implementations.
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. And before we started recording this interview, I warned you that I was going to ask you this question. And you told me that you have received it 3 times already this week or this past week. There was this very critical vulnerability that was discovered in the Lightning Network. And it was reported, and there were some pretty fatalistic predictions about where the project is going, and some said that there's a requirement for a soft fork on the base layer to fix Lightning, and some even acted as this is the doomsday for Lightning Network. This is it. You should stop developing it because it failed. Yet you still work on it. Why?
Because I don't think it's as severe as some people may think about it. I mean, it's something that it's fundamental on how Lightning works, but we haven't seen like Lightning stop working after that was released. Right now, there are like some patches in all the major implementations to try to make it less severe, because this was disclosed to the wild, I think it was like a month ago or 2 months ago, but like the devs knew about it like a year ago or something like that. I mean, it was like properly disclosed. Do I think there's a problem there? Sure. Do I think it's easily exploitable? No, I don't personally. I think that the requirements for this to work, both at the Lightning level and especially at the Bitcoin level, are pretty hard to pull. Theoretically, you can do it. You can like kind of like eclipse those nodes in that sense, like send those conflicted transactions to make them not be able to, or like to steal part of the funds. But it's not like you can pull that off by yourself easily without spending a significant amount of money like for cloaking the mempool. And in the end, like if you don't want to like expose your node that much, you can always like reduce your exposure in terms of HCLC count or HCLC amount. I think like Lightning in many ways depends on how Bitcoin works. It depends on how likely are you to be able to settle something on chain. And we've known for years, from its inception, that there's this what's the word? This requirement. Let's say that's not the word I'm looking for, but like, let's say requirement. That this assumption. That's the word I was looking for. There's this assumption that you're always going to be able to close a channel in case you need to, and that's not really true. Like if the mempool is cloaked and you need to close a channel, and then you cannot pay the fees that you're supposed to be paying for it, or you don't want to afford the fees that the mempool is requiring, then you're kind of screwed. And if the whole functionality of Lightning depends on the fact that you should be able to close a channel on demand, and you cannot, then we could say the same thing about Lightning being broken since its beginning. But I don't think that's it. There may be situations in where it may not perform as good as it's supposed to, but that doesn't mean it's broken. Not for me, at least.
Wasabi Wallet is unfairly private. It's the most advanced, most used Bitcoin privacy wallet, with 500,000 downloads across Windows, macOS and Linux, as well as thousands of fresh and new Bitcoins get mixed every month. Wasabi makes use of the new generation Wabi-Sabi engine to create mega conjoins, thus mixing your Bitcoins with those of hundreds of other users. For amounts lower than 0.01 BTC and remixes, you pay no coordination fee. If you don't use the conjoins, Wasabi Wallet has a native Tor integration and downloads block filters to help you keep your network level and public key privacy. Download Wasabi Wallet for free today at wasabiwallet.io and experience the future of Bitcoin privacy. Future of Bitcoin privacy. Future of Bitcoin. Future of Bitcoin. Future of Bitcoin. Future of Bitcoin privacy.
Let's talk about one of your other projects, which is the Eye of Satoshi. It's a Watchtower implementation which you created a couple of years ago. And I was going to ask you, what is a Watchtower? I remember reading about it in 2017 or 2018. And at the time, the critics were saying that Watchtowers as a concept are centralizing, and they're imposing someone's authority over the economic activity between other nodes. So how does this work?
The idea of a Watchtower in general is someone that may act in your behalf when you are not connected to the network. So one of the other assumptions or requirements that the Lightning Network poses towards people running on it is that you should be online, not all the time, but at least periodically. If you go offline for a long time, then your counterparty can try to cheat. Because at the end of the day, from the outside, all the states of a Lightning channel are valid states. And the only one who knows what's the latest state between two parties are the two parties, right? So if I try to spend something from an old state in where the funds are more beneficial for me, and you're not there to say that that's not true, then I may just get away with it because I'm not gonna propose something that is more beneficial for me and then complain about it myself, right? You should be the one saying hey, no, that's not true, right? So the idea of a Watchtower is a service that it's there when you're not there. So you can send all the information that it needs in order to react to a channel breach, which is the concept that I was describing. And then the Watchtower would be able to react to that channel breach and swipe all the funds towards yourself because your counterparty was trying to cheat. In terms of centralizing, it depends. You don't have to run a Watchtower for anyone else. You can run your Watchtower for yourself. It may make more or less sense. If you're able to run a service 24/7, then you may also be able to run your node 24/7. But it may be the case that, for instance, you don't want to run something that has hotkeys on it 24/7, but you want to be able to react to that 24/7. I think for me, Watchtowers, the idea was to be able to use them as a non-trusted third party. And the whole point of it is if you're offering these as a service, it may not be the case that there's only one or two Watchtowers there, getting all the information. The way I used to envision it was this should be an open market. A single Watchtower may not even have all the information from all your channels. You may be able to be connected to multiple of them and then just separate all the stuff depending on whether you want more replication or someone is offering you a better service or so on. I don't see how that centralizes the Lightning Network. It's something that you use and you shouldn't be using it on a trusted way. If you're trusting the Watchtower, it's kind of the same as trusting your LSP or trusting anything else. And I don't think they should be trusted in any way.
Yeah, on the topic of the Lightning Network, there have been lots of proposals to make it route better, to make it more private, to make it more efficient, more decentralized. And yet it seems like the efficiency that came with, I guess in the last couple of years, the Lightning Network became more reliable, but it was mostly because some people gave up on the Raspberry Pi nodes, which I think is detrimental on the long term. And they started using an LSP like Breeze or like Phoenix, or they even switched completely to something which is 100% custodial, like wallet of Satoshi or whatever. Do you see any way in which we can get more decentralization in Lightning and also privacy?
I think that depends on the user itself. Like if you're valuing the reliability of the payments instead of the decentralization of the network, then you're like choosing wallet of Satoshi or like a custodial service or like something like that. Which, by the way, I think it's what makes more sense for end users. Like a lot of us do care about it being decentralized, being more private, something. But the end user, like the real end user, my mom, if at some point she ends up like using this, she may not care that much. Or, I mean, she may if I tell her like, you shouldn't be doing this and that. But like, I don't think like the view towards decentralization and privacy is shared amongst like all the individuals are going to end up using this. I think we've seen some improvement in the way this works because whether we like it or not, centralized things were better in terms of UX. If I have Phoenix, you have Phoenix, we send a payment to each other. Like that's hardly going to fail. Same with like routing fees. Same with having a Raspberry Pi or like having a really beefy setup. Do I see a way of like making this better? Not really. Like if we don't offer something that the end user is going to want to have, and that thing goes through running your own node, then there's no like real purpose, real reason for doing it. Like I do run my own Bitcoin and Lightning node because I would rather not being gatekept by anyone else, especially in Bitcoin. And I use Phoenix because I think it's like really useful for my use case, which is like if I'm traveling around Argentina, for example, and I have like $200 or $300 in my wallet, I may not care that much if like Phoenix is in the middle as an LSP or not. I would rather not having anything like really custodial, but that's just like the way I use it. And I used to have like a dual setup, like with Zeus, like with my own node, and then Phoenix in case, right? So I could like choose whether I wanted to like have these over Tor or that, which may have like a higher reliability, but I may use like more sporadically when the other one fails. So to summarize, I think, as I said, it really depends on the end user, and if we are not offering anything to them that they really value and goes towards decentralization, then they are not going to use it.
CryptoSteel offers a durable, physical backup for cryptocurrency key and recovery words. These user-friendly cold storage devices withstand harsh conditions, including fires, floods, and earthquakes. Made from the finest European stainless steel, they are built to last. Accessible to all and requiring no computer skills, the original CryptoSteel cassette and capsule have been innovating Bitcoin security since 2013. They provide a reliable and robust backup, essential for the safety and longevity of your digital investments. Ideal for protecting your digital wealth. CryptoSteel isn't just a one-trick pony. Of course, it works with your Beep39 seed phrase, but you can also use it for important passwords, Bitcoin Core passphrases, Nostr private keys, and much more. Buy your CryptoSteel metal backup today from cryptosteel.com and use promo code BTCTKVR to get a 10% discount. CryptoSteel. Secure your Bitcoin like an OG.
In the first part of this interview, we established that obviously Lightning has not failed. And I think there are two metrics that prove this, even though the latter one is not very optimistic. So the first metric concerns uses and number of transactions. And we can see that we already have a nation state that uses Lightning Network every day. And we have a lot of economic activity with small transactions being moved back and forth. We have a social network that's decentralized, which was built with the idea of enabling users to tip each other or zap on Nostr. Or No Star, because I found out that it's actually pronounced as No Star, which means good night in Welsh. No Star. Ben Ark told me. And the other metric, which I guess is more relevant for Ethereum people, is TVL. It's what they call total value locked, as in how many coins are locked on this second layer. And it seems like Lightning has been not necessarily stagnating, but it's still less than 1% of the Bitcoin supply that's being moved through it. And why do you think it's so? Is it that you think whales don't really trust second layers, or they can afford, or the fees have been so small that they could afford to pay for them on the main chain?
Maybe I really have no clue, to be honest, about this. I guess it, from what I said, and again, like I'm definitely not an expert on this, but for you, it may not make sense to like have coins locked there for like the risk of like having that in a hot wallet may not be worth it, especially if you're not like moving those funds like you normally. Like if the only thing you're doing is like making a payment every now and then, and you're like really wealthy, you may not care about like how high the fees on chain are. I mean, otherwise we would have seen most of the traffic being moved to the Lightning Network, apart from like, you know, like ordinals and like stuff that is cloaking the mempool. But I don't think that was the case, right? Like the mempool was still like having volume before like ordinals and all this stuff started to like be the main use of it. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe we've reached a level of capitalization for Lightning that makes sense for the kind of traffic that we have. And given if payments are not failing and you're able to like use it and like have proper revenue with it, and you're a routing node, you may not need to just to open more channels because you don't see that you're getting more revenue with it. Again, I don't think it may be above my pay grade. Sorry, like the question may be above my pay grade, but I have no clue.
Yeah, to me, it's really upsetting sometimes when I see that WBTC, which is Bitcoin that's being custodied by BitGo and issued as a token on the Ethereum blockchain, that one has a much larger volume than Liquid and Lightning and everything in Bitcoin combined as a layer 2.
Do they get like any interest on that? Or they like make money out of it, or it's just like something that they log for reasons? Like what's the purpose of that?
They just want to put it in various contracts. I spoke with a guy here in Argentina. He says he never sells his Bitcoin. He just puts it in some DeFi contract and earns 8% a year or something like that. And he uses that 8% to pay the bills or whatever.
I guess the point here is that the people who are doing this see more revenue or like a better, mainly like a better opportunity doing that in terms of like revenue than like building a routing node and like getting fees for routing payments. There's also a higher risk. Like I would personally not put my Bitcoin trap in any Ethereum whatever thing, because like we've seen multiple times how like rugs have been pulled, and then people that were like making 7, 8, like 13%, whatever percentage of interest on that land ended up like losing money because, you know, like you had a decent amount of money put there hoping that you would, I don't know, like make millions on it. If you're down for that, if you're down to like add the additional risk, whatever. I'm not. I don't speculate in that way. But there's, I mean, we've seen it for years. Like there's people who would bet on everything, and then, you know, eventually we see the news about like how many people have lost their money. So the fact that the numbers look better or more interesting is not appealing to me, to be honest.
Yeah, I think this is a good moment. You told me before we started this interview that you're more focused on Bitcoin Core these days than Lightning, and I spent most of the time asking you Lightning questions.
I spent like a decent amount of time doing Lightning, so it's completely fine.
Let's also talk about your work on the Bitcoin protocol, the base layer. What do you do there with Chaincode, or by yourself?
So I moved to Chaincode to start working back on Bitcoin peer-to-peer, which is what I was doing back in the day before starting working on Lightning. My background is more in academia, so I did a bunch of research on the peer-to-peer layer, mostly about like how to infer topology and how to like do things in a way that Core doesn't agree. And at the time, I thought it was a good idea. Then I saw like what was the motivation not to go towards the route I was going for. So I was kind of like the attacker, and I mean, in my mind, I was not, but like I was kind of like the attacker to the protocol. So I moved there to work on peer-to-peer, and the idea of what I'm trying to do is hardening the peer-to-peer network for Bitcoin. So analyzing like what are the potential attacks that can be pulled on Bitcoin and try to minimize the impact of that. In terms of like, again, privacy or DOS attack vectors or like network inference, so on and so forth. I've only been around for Core like 6 months now. So right when I moved to, well, not 6 months actually. I've been in New York for 6 months and working for Chaincode for 5, I think. So far, I've been reviewing the Bitcoin peer-to-peer code. I got my first PR 3 days ago, merge, which I'm like super happy about. Like 4 months to get a PR merge, not that much. It's not like a super relevant PR, but it has to do with how we add nodes manually and like the edge cases that were around that part of the code base. But the idea is getting that. I'm building, or I'm like writing a lot of how the peer-to-peer network works. And soon TM, I hope to be able to be releasing some blog posts about the whole stuff, like how it works from the ground up. So if other people want to contribute to the network part, they don't have to like go through the same thing I've need to go through. As I was saying, like I have a pretty academic background in that sense. So for me, writing down how things works makes me understand how things works. And then if I already have it write it down for me, I can just like put it up for anyone else. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's like super interesting understanding how it works, trying to like find the small details that may not be perfect or may have like an edge case that can break things. And instead of trying to exploiting it, try to fix it.
What are the potential benefits to improving the peer-to-peer side of the Bitcoin core code? Could it be that you communicate much easier with other nodes around the world, or sync your node faster? What do you think are the potential benefits for developing this?
Well, the thing that we should think about here is that everything in Bitcoin builds on top of a peer-to-peer network. Without the peer-to-peer network, we don't have communication. I mean, you may have like the blocks in satellite or something like that, but like that's just like one communication channel, one side channel that you can use when you don't have actually the peer-to-peer network. But everything works on top of that. So if the peer-to-peer network is slow for some reason, then the whole code base is going to be slow. If there's an issue with how node communicates with themselves, then you're going to have an issue. If there's a way for an attacker to isolate your node, then you're not going to receive anything, right? It's something that I've always find amusing because not these days. There's a nice amount of people working on peer-to-peer these days. I think I'm like super excited about it because you can like talk with other devs which are also interested in these days. But the peer-to-peer code is one of the codes that has changed the least since, well, apart from consensus, obviously. But how it works hasn't changed not much since when I was doing research in 2015. I mean, the shape of the code has changed, but how it works itself hasn't that much. And I guess it's mainly because, if it works, don't break it. But it used to be the case when I was like doing research back 3 or 4 years ago, that every year or so there was like a new attack or a new way of like pulling something network based that may affect the way Bitcoin was working. Or it could be like a different kind of like a Eclipse attack, or like a attacker with like a nation state kind of attacker could like infer where the transactions came from, and then if they have like more information than that, they may be able to like know who is creating those transactions, or you may be able to eclipse some nodes or so on. So in the end, I think like the robustness of the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network improves the robustness of the whole code base of the whole node. Like without it, you're kind of like screwed.
Before I ask you the next question, I just have to mention that I must thank CryptoSteel and Wasabi Wallet for paying for my plane ticket. I couldn't have been here if it wasn't for their donations. So thank you guys. And yeah, it's a CryptoSteel capsule. It's not available here in Argentina yet. You can take a look if you want.
I'm not gonna open it. I'm expecting this has like something on it which I'm not gonna look at. So.
It has my Nostr private key, so you can check it out if you want. Only a few letters, not the rest of it.
Yeah, I don't want to impersonate you on Nostr, so let's not open it up. I can like definitely tell that there's something inside.
Yeah. And I was thinking while you were talking about improving the peer-to-peer layer of Bitcoin and the communications, that basically some guys who are very adamant that we should ossify see you as the enemy, the guy who is thinking of big ideas but will end up breaking Bitcoin. But in the cypherpunk circles, this is really fascinating because you're trying to improve Bitcoin. How do you reconcile with the fact that there are people, you do a lot of work learning how Bitcoin works and playing with the parameters on test nets and trying to think of ways to make it better. But at the same time, there are guys who not only that they don't appreciate your work, but they also consider that you're a potential enemy.
Because I'm trying to understand how it works. Like I don't get the point.
No, because you're proposing changes to Bitcoin.
Oh, of course, because like complexity means you're the enemy, right? Or changing anything on the code base means that you're the enemy. I think, okay. So are we assuming that, the code base as it was in 2009 is the perfect code base, like that it was like bulletproof or something? Like, do we think that we should like scrap all the improvements that have been added to the code base since like whatever year that we magically decide on? Like, I do agree that, complexity is kind of like the enemy. Like if you make things like too complex, then there's more ways of like things breaking. Like the more complex the system is, the more likely it is that it will break for whatever reason. But people also want functionality. It's like, we want to be able to like transact fast, but we don't want to like change the confirmation times. We want all the transactions to be confirmed fast. In the sense that we don't want to like wait for like many blocks if the mempool is clogged, but we don't want to increase the block size, which I'm not advocating for. It's just like this is always a trade-off. It doesn't matter like what side of Bitcoin you're looking at. If you want to make something better for some use case, you may be adding complexity, which may be completely tangential to your existing use case, and there's no real reason for you to complain about it. But if we just like see complexity as a problem without like properly analyzing what it's bringing to the table, then we are never going to change anything. Like, if we are okay with like Bitcoin, how Bitcoin was in 2016, then I guess fork it from 2016 and like work with it. Like, you may not be happy with it because it would be a completely different system, and you would not. I mean, forking it there and like creating your own project means that you're not working on Bitcoin anymore. But it's all about like what the community as a whole agrees on. Like there's always going to be people wanted to do one thing and people wanted to do another thing, and at the end we have to compromise on what's better. I know, like I don't know how people see this in this way. It's all about like who has more power here, like who makes the decisions. I really don't know. Like what are the arguments from people who are like against moving forward?
You spent quite a few years developing the Lightning Network, and I was going to ask you if there are any other layer 2s for Bitcoin that exist or are being proposed that you like, and to present maybe pros and cons of each one of them according to your expertise or understanding of them.
How do you define a layer 2? Because we could like be super controversial here. Is Liquid a layer 2? Is Liquid a layer 2 for you? Is it not? Like if it's working sideways, it's considered a layer 2, or it has to be working on top of it. Anything wrapped is a layer 2. Like I don't know. I'm actually asking you because I think it depends on who you ask. There's people who consider Liquid a layer 2. I think it's kind of like between 1 and 2, but it's not really 2. And I think it has its use case, not one that I normally advocate for because I don't see the point for myself. But there may be people who find it interesting and do find a use case for it. I haven't seen any proper development of anything that I consider layer 2 being there. I cannot tell, like, maybe you know examples of something that maybe consider a layer 2 and we can discuss about it. Myself, have no clue. Like for me, the only layer 2 that is actually working and there's active development and it's being used is Lightning.
On the topic of Liquid, I think it was mostly built for the Federation members, which are exchanges, because they can settle their transactions on a chain that has privacy built on top of it. So you have Whale Alert and all of these bots on Twitter that let everyone know when a large amount of Bitcoin has been moved. And they can prevent that by using confidential transactions. But I think these exchanges figured out that they can essentially manipulate the market by broadcasting this information to the entire world. So they can profit from this state of uncertainty where people are asking, wait, what does this mean that thousands of Bitcoins have moved from this exchange to that other exchange? So I think, in principle, the idea of privacy between exchanges is good, but exchanges have figured out a way to take advantage of the openness of the Bitcoin ledger. So yeah, it's delicate. Also, Liquid has lots of other ideas that have been tested, but none of them caught up because I think it approached them backwards. As in, they looked at Ethereum and they saw, okay, Ethereum has NFTs. They also built Satoshi. It didn't get much traction. But
I mean, to me, I'm not saying Liquid doesn't have like some value. I find it like really interesting in terms of like testing stuff. You know, like as you were saying, like confidential transactions were added there, and it's something that I don't think is ever going to be added to Bitcoin. But like as a research project, was interesting to see. You know, and it was adding functionality that, again, if it doesn't, at some point I think it was kind of like the new Litecoin in that sense, or like the usable testnet. We try something here. If it works, we may be able to like backport it to Bitcoin. For me, that's pretty good. But I think it's not something that end users use that much. Like corporations may use it, but not something that the average user of Bitcoin would end up using. I completely forgot about, again, like whether you think this is layer 2 or not. There's Fedimint and there's Cashew, right? Are those considered layer 2s? Do you consider those layer 2s? 2.5s? Yeah. I mean, there's all the stuff that is being built. I don't want like people to call me off, especially like Kaye and people out at Fedimint. I do like what they are doing. But it's all about what we consider one thing or the other. Like, yeah.
Hello, Bitcoin Takeover listeners. This is Victor from IVPN. We could have produced the flashy ad with lofty claims, but we like the straightforward approach, so I'll just stick to the basics here. How are we different from other VPN providers? IVPN is run by Bitcoiners. We've been accepting Bitcoin since before the block size wars, now using BTC Pay server. and also accept Lightning payments. We also aim for radical transparency supported by open source software, regular audits, and a transparent team. And finally, there's absolutely no KYC with IVPN. We don't ask for an email or any other personal information when you sign up. If you would like to test our service, send an email to trial@ivpn.net to receive a 30-day IVPN Pro voucher.
Hello, I'm Vlad and I have been a user of IVPN Pro for longer than 1 year. What I like the most about it is being able to use 7 devices at the same time and using the multi-hop feature to connect to 2 different servers of my choosing at the same time. Also, your account consists of a randomly generated string of letters and numbers which are not linked to your email address, bank account, or real-life identity. You top it up with a Lightning payment and you get instant confirmation at low fees. Definitely get your 30-day IVPN Pro trial by sending an email to trial@ivpn.net. Make sure you use a burner email address that you probably already have for trolling. What about drive chains? What do you think about them?
Drive chains. I haven't read that much about drive chains. I'm not gonna try be controversial here because I try not to talk about things that I don't know that much. The only thing I'm gonna say, this is gonna be controversial anyway, so I don't care. But drive chains are kind of like a problem in looking for a solution looking for a problem, you know. Are they useful? Generally, what I've read, I think so. But it goes all the way back to whether, I mean, the complexity thing that we were talking about before. There's a lot of solutions being discussed these days about like how should we, or what should be the next soft fork that will end all soft forks. It's kind of like we don't want to add and more soft forks. Let's just add one that adds all the functionality that we may want. The issue with this way of thinking is that we already thought that Lightning was going to be that, or Taproot was going to be that, or whatever other thing was going to be that.
You mean SegWit? Not Lightning.
Yeah, but by Lightning I mean yes, SegWit in base layer, but Lightning was going to be the scalability solution, and now we want drive chains because we realized by implementing Lightning that there's other things that were not thought when Lightning was proposed. And I think that applies. The more general the protocol you're trying to build, the more complex it's going to be for you to figure out all the implications that that's going to add to the system. So again, I'm not going to shit on it. I'm not going to complement it. I think any generalistic solution is going to add a lot of good to the system, but potentially a lot of things that we were not considering. Just look at Taproot, or Taproot plus the discount in SegWit. We have enabled this ordinal thing in a cheap way when that was something that I don't think anyone envisioned, and it was not even that big of a change in that way. We were not enabling complex scripts. We were not having transaction introspection. We were not having a lot of the things that are being considered for not only drive chains but other governance proposals. Yeah, that's why I think that a lot of people are pushing back to these kind of changes. If I cannot grasp what all the implications of a change are going to be, I'm not comfortable with accepting that change. And I think that's being the vibe on Bitcoin for the last 1-2 years.
Yeah, to me, it's certainly interesting because on one hand, you have all of these soft fork proposals, and on the other hand, you have people who figure out their way inside. You had Casey who figured out how to do ordinal inscriptions, and that did not require any change to the consensus rules. And now you have the BitVM situation. And that one, actually, I spoke with Sergio Lerner. I hope I'm going to get to interview him sometime. But he told me that BitVM is exciting because it enables him to have some functions that otherwise he would have had only with drive chains. So that one already exists. It can do computation off-chain. And I don't fully understand how it works. It's a pretty complex. I mean, a lot of people pretend to have read that paper and understood it.
I'm not going to pretend I haven't read it. I know the idea of like how the state machine works and like how all these like off-chain or offline computation and then doing the proof on-chain works, because that's what fault proofs have been doing in Ethereum for some time. But again, I'm not going to pretend I have like grasped all the implications of that.
Yeah, anyway, to me, it's super interesting that we have these debates about stuff that we should add to Bitcoin, and then someone comes along and they figure out something that wasn't figured out before and requires no permission from anyone whatsoever.
Yeah, but the thing with these kind of solutions that doesn't require any change mean that normally, I mean, they may work in the happy case, which I think it's a case for BitBM, again, without like having fully read that. But what I've seen, and when I was like talking to Super Testnet the other day, is that normally when you have to like prove one of these things that didn't go well, like if you have to like prove a fault in the protocol with BitBM, that may entail like a lot of transactions on chain, which is something that it may not suit the protocol that you are trying to build on top. It's like, as long as everything goes well, it's, you know, pretty sweet. If not, then the cost of closing this may surpass the cost of saying like, yeah, I don't care, you know, like take the money. Plus how much you're going to clog the mempool if like a lot of people try to like do this at the same time, right? So when we add soft forks or when we try to like make something different, it's normally to make the whole thing make sense, not to be like, oh, you know, it works in this case, but that one may not even be suitable for our current state of the protocol. So, yeah.
According to your view on this topic of soft forks, which one do you think is the least contentious and pretty beneficial with the lowest amount of risk? And what is the riskiest of them all?
For governance stuff, you mean? Oh, wow. You really want to be controversial here. Okay. I mean, the one I think, well, the use case I think it's interesting. The only use case for governance I see interesting myself is bolts, because I think it's a really well-defined use case that people have been asking for some time. Whether it's of bolt or it's like CTB plus something, I don't care that much. It depends on like how we add these changes, right? Like if you add CTB with like a lot of functionality, then you're adding way more than just bolts, right? To me, I'm more of on the side of define what the use case you're trying to solve is and add a solution for that. And if that implies a soft fork, then we like fight for it. And you know, you may end up like having someone who champions it and like does all the proper research and explains why this makes sense and why it's not going to be backfire in any way. So I'm not going to like name any in general, because like I would need to pretend that I have read all of them and like compare all of them and all the cons, all the pros. I haven't. But the way it makes sense to me is not being general in that sense. Like the more general you are, the more things you're opening for backfire. And just like adding functionality for the sake of adding functionality without like a proper use case for it doesn't make sense to me. Bolts, I think makes sense. There's been like a need for that for years. There's been talk for that for years. More expressiveness of the language may make sense and may enable stuff, but require a way deeper analysis of the like things that can go wrong. And until we don't have that, not just me, a lot of people are going to be like, not worth the effort.
Satochip provides open source solutions based on smart card to assist you in your crypto journey. The hardware wallet lets you safely store your private keys within the tamper-proof chip memory, while Sato Dime allows you to create a barrier cold storage in 2 clicks thanks to its mobile app. And Seedkeeper is the ultimate hardware device to store and manage your seed phrases. Become self-custody with SatoChip. Your keys, your coins.
Yeah, so for those listening who did not really understand, he said, I'm assuming vaults, V-A-U-L-T-S. In your native language, which is Catalan, I think, B and V sound very similar. And it sounded like bolt sometimes. And bolt is something else. It's a different concept in Lightning. It's just a clarification. And don't worry. It's just the way that you pronounce this consonant, which is B, V. They sound similar. Anyway, let's talk a bit about Chaincode Labs, because you work there, and it has some of the most amazing talent in Bitcoin development. And it's not really centralizing. I mean, you're a small team. A lot of people have come and gone over the years. Now you have Peter Willie, and you also have an academy that trains new Bitcoin developers. You have these programs, not an academy. That's the wrong way to put it. But even Binance has an academy, and Andrew Tate has an academy. So everyone has an academy these days. You have programs to train a new generation of developers and teach them how to do some initially very basic but important stuff. Can you tell me more about what it's like to work there?
To me, it's kind of like a dream come true. Before this, I was working with Spiral, again, in the house Satoshi. And it was kind of like fully remote, working from whatever I wanted. I picked the project that I wanted to work on. It was pretty sweet in that sense. But I felt that it was kind of like lonely, because getting people to work on the same project that you're working on, and like people who really understand the kind of like problems that you're trying to work on, is hard. But there's the project in where like people are paying attention to, which is Core, and we can all agree that it has interesting problems. Like really clever people working on it. So going to work at Chaincode was opening up the opportunity to work with Peter, for example, with Suhas, with Martin and Mark. I mean, Mark is not working that much. Mark as merch, like Mark Ithart. He is not working on peer-to-peer, but I was super interested in working on peer-to-peer. And there was like no better, from my point of view, no better like team to work with than Martin, Suhas, and Peter. So it really depends on what you want to do. Like I wanted to start contributing to Core for some years, and I've tried that before on my own, and it was not much appealing, to be honest. Like it's the learning curve and like the entering curve is pretty steep. So it helps like being able to like work with people who are working on the same code base that you are the ones that most likely have wrote the function that you're looking at, and you can just like brainstorm anything or like talk about like why was the motivation for that, or what does that line that you wrote 7 years ago is for, and you know about it. As you said, the team has been rotating quite a lot. I think they look for talent. They look for the devs that kind of like feel the position they are looking for, because there's normally no open positions at Chaincode. They just like, if they want to like do some cryptography project, for example, or there's like a reason for like look for a cryptographer, they may like try to find one. There's not going to be like an opening position for you to like go there. But the whole point of it is having like a closed team, so you can work on specific projects and like with the team. Like, how to explain this? One of the things that is pretty abnormal from Chaincode compared to like other companies in the space is that you work on the office, which is it's something that people don't know, no? But like working for Chaincode means like living in New York, and it means living in New York because they have an office in New York and everyone works from the office. And there's a good reason for that. Like SimLN was built there because, like we were talking about it. Like Carla had that idea about like, oh, I need these to test this thing. And it was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I actually think that a simulator for this makes a lot of sense. Let's start like talking about that, right? You could do that remotely, but there's a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions, a lot of things that you normally don't bother people with, but you do if you're like in the same office. And like by a random discussions about like how this thing works, that may like kind of like evolve to a new project being built with something that you normally would not like being someone about, because you would be like, oh, I'm not going to like waste this like Peter's time, for example. Like I would not ping Peter for like a random question I have about the code base, you know. But if he's there, I could be like, hey, Peter, would you mind like discussing the like why this is in this way, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know like what it's to say, honestly. Like to me, working there, it's been like really fun. And even though I promised myself not to go back to an office ever after like 3 years working remotely, it was worth being like, yeah, whatever. Like I'm definitely like going to join them. So yeah, loving it.
I remember there was a point in 2017 or 2018 when Blockstream was hiring all the developers, and most of them were working there. And I was actually concerned at one point, I tweeted about it, that Blockstream is becoming a centralizing force, which is getting all the talent, all the developers. And then Chaincode, I'm not sure exactly when it was founded, but it started growing at around the time. And I think now Chaincode has more Bitcoin Core developers than... Actually, no. Stupid statement. But a lot of people have also left Blockstream, so it's very hard to measure. But it's good to have this type of balance, to have...
I think there's still a meme around that, you know, like Blockstream controls Bitcoin, which is... I mean, it's funny, because if you actually look at who's working on Bitcoin from Blockstream, there's not that many people. I do agree with you that it's more healthy these days because it's more spread. There's it's not only... Blockstream, but it also Brink and Chaincode, and the HRF is also like giving out grant for that. Like Spiral is giving out grant for Bitcoin working on core. So your statement for me I completely agree. We shouldn't like centralize the development of core or any like open source project that we care about. But yeah, I see it as like way more healthy these days.
Final question, Sergi. Where can people follow you and keep up with your projects? And how can someone start contributing to Bitcoin? Because I get you went through that journey.
Follow me. I'm normally on Twitter. The handle is SR_GI. It's kind of like a pun on my name that never got like... it was not as good as I thought. You know, like as you were mentioning before, the pronunciation of my name is different depending on where you are. So I thought, oh, you know, for English speakers, it's going to be like pretty close to my name, and it's going to be easy for them to like pronounce it. And actually, that's not it. But you know, I went along with it. It's been like that for years. So same as in GitHub, SR. In that case, it's like middle colon GI. Twitter is underscore. GitHub is middle. With respect to contributing to core and learning about core, there's this thing that we are building at Chaincode that is the Bitcoin Dev project. We are trying to make it way easier for devs to onboard on core. There are many resources to this these days. I mean, there's books on it. There's like seminars on it. You can like follow the Chaincode seminars on Bitcoin generally. But it also depends on what you are at. Like if you have like no previous knowledge about Bitcoin, and you're like trying to go straight to core, like maybe you need to like do some homework first, right? If you're someone who knows about it and you've wanted to contribute to core, you're knowledgeable, and the only thing that it may be blocking you, as it was my case, is like approaching the code base and learning C++. I guess the review club is one of the best things I can vouch for. Keep an eye on the project. We want to like launch something pretty soon, and I hope I'm not like spoiling anything. So it's easier for people to onboard Bitcoin Core, and yeah, like join IRC. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Like ping people. Like I know how hard the journey could be. If anyone needs help, like ping me. I'll do my best.
Thank you very much, Sergi, and I hope I'll interview you in the future again and talk more about what you've built with Chaincode.
I hope I have interesting things to talk to you about in a while. Yeah.
that's a wrap.